Idolatry of worship. Let's talk about it. Hey, welcome to Worship Launch. My name is Zach Dietz. And first off, I know I promised a big video that is coming, and that video is still coming. I promise you. I'm putting a lot of work and effort into that video, and it may not be ready for a few weeks, but we'll just have to see how long it takes me to kind of put all my thoughts and research together for that video. But at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a hint of what that video will be about. So stay tuned to the end of this video. But for this week, though, I'd like to talk about this idea of idolatry of worship. So in Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 38, you may recall the story of Mary and Martha. And I'm going to read that right now just to refresh your memory a little bit. Starting in verse 38, it says, "Now as they were traveling along, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into their home," speaking of Jesus. "And she had a sister called Mary, who was also seated at the Lord's feet and was listening to his word. But Martha was distracted with all her preparations, and she came up to him and said, 'Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do the serving by myself? Then tell her to help me.' But the Lord answered and said to her, 'Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her.'" So, and you might also recall in this very same chapter, Luke 10, starting in verse 17, Jesus sends out 72 people to different towns and tells them that they're going to do miracles in those towns. And I want you to read with me their response when they return to Jesus. And then I want you to hear Jesus's response to them. So we're going to start in verse 17. This story actually starts in verse 1, but I want to pick up where it comes to their response after they've gone to these towns and done miracles. I want you to hear what they say to Jesus. "Now the 72 returned with joy, saying, 'Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name.' And then here's what Jesus says. He said to them, 'I watched Satan fall from heaven like lightning. Behold, I have given you authority to walk on snakes and scorpions, and authority over all the power of the enemy, and nothing will injure you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are recorded in heaven.'" So, both of these accounts in this same chapter, and there are other examples I was going to use, but for the sake of time, I've just chosen these two, and they're both in the same chapter of Luke. But both of these accounts reflect the idolatry of ministry. To give a more simplistic definition of what I mean by this, I just want to say that Jesus wants us to delight in Him more than what He is doing through us. So our loving Him and growing in relationship with Him matters more to Him than what we do in His name. So how does this translate to idolatry of worship? And when I say the word worship, I'm specifically talking about music portion of worship, because this is a worship music channel. So I know that worship entails many other things, but we're specifically talking about worship leaders right now. So how does this translate to the idolatry of worship? Number one, I'm going to give you three things that come to my mind. Number one is when we as worship leaders focus on presentation more than Jesus Himself. So this plays out in many different ways, but I suspect that as I say that, the Lord will bring to mind how it might be playing out in your own ministry. So I'm not going to go into great detail about that because I'd like the Spirit to do His work with you through that. But I'll say it again: when we as worship leaders focus on presentation more than Jesus Himself. So number 2 is when our focus becomes on imitating other big worship teams rather than focusing our worship on Jesus. Again, I'll let the Spirit sort of do His work in you through that, but just kind of break that down a little bit is, I see this so much in our day where worship teams are trying to mimic other big worship teams in the way they present themselves on stage, the way they present their music, the look of the worship team, all of that. And so number 3 is when we get caught up in petty things such as album sales, Instagram likes, the way we look on stage, how many people are watching our music videos on YouTube, instead of asking the Lord if any of that is what He wants from us. So these are just three ways that this sort of idolatry of ministry or idolatry of worship specifically plays out with worship leaders. So these 3 things are just 3 things that came to my mind right off the bat, maybe because those things are things that I have to war against in my own heart. Those 3 things are things that I war against in my own heart all the time. And so, but the Spirit may be bringing other things to your mind that you need to war against in your own heart. And whatever it may be, the fight against idolatry is worth it. The fight against idolatry is worth it. Jesus Himself is worth it. He alone deserves all of our attention and all of our focus. So, to sort of sum up this video, I want to leave you with 5 practical questions that Dr. Eric Geiger gives to guard against ministry idolatry. And these were super helpful for me, and so I wanted to pass them along to you. And so these are 5 practical questions to guard against ministry idolatry. Number 1 is, how much of my contentment is connected to the tide of my ministry influence? Number 2, do my prayers reflect that I am more thankful for the salvation He has provided for me or for the ministry He has given me? That's a good one. Number 3, if I had to choose, which would I prefer, a closer walk with Jesus or a more effective ministry? Number 4, if my ministry were suddenly taken from me, would I still rejoice? And just to add to that question, would I still rejoice, or would my world just come shattering down? And number 5, do I seek God only for His blessing and direction, or do I also seek God for Him alone? I think those questions are something that we should, as worship leaders, maybe just print those on an index card and set them on your desk or in your Bible or somewhere, and just ask yourself those questions every day. What is most important to me in my life right now? Is it my ministry, or is it Jesus Himself? Am I working on my relationship with Jesus Himself more than my ministry, or am I focused on the work of the ministry more than Jesus? And I think that's good wisdom. At the beginning of this video, I told you that I'm in the process of working on a very big video, and I want to do this thing right. And so I don't want to do it prematurely. I've been doing about 8 months of research on this topic. And so the key word for the next, or I don't know if it's going to be the next video, but it's probably going to be in a week or 2 or 3. So, but this video, the key word is Bethel. Stay tuned.